There are two California regulations that should be on the radar of every restaurant marketer, technology leader, and operator, whether you have locations in California or not. The first involves privacy and website tracking. The second involves allergen disclosures. And neither sounds particularly exciting, neither feels like a growth initiative, and neither is likely showing up on many marketing roadmaps right now. Yet both have the potential to create significant legal, operational, and competitive implications for restaurant brands over the next few years. Let's start it off with the privacy one. You've probably heard the acronym CIPA or CIPA for short being mentioned more frequently lately. You may have even gotten a lawsuit. CIPA stands for California Invasion of Privacy Act, and the law itself has existed for decades now. What's changed is how it's being applied or how lawyers are using it to launch litigation. A growing number of lawsuits have focused on website technologies that collect visitor information, including tracking pixels, session replay tools, chat widgets, analytics platforms, and other technologies that monitor user behavior online. Essentially, all the things we're using to get data. And I'm not an attorney, and none of this should be interpreted as legal advice. Every organization should consult qualified legal counsel regarding its specific and unique situation. What I can tell you is that many restaurant websites contain far more tracking technologies than their teams may realize. Metapixels, Google Analytics, Microsoft Clarity, Hotjar, customer data platform, CDPs, loyalty integrations, marketing automation tools, personalization engines, chat platforms, third-party ordering technologies. Over the years, these technologies get added through campaigns, platform implementations, vendor relationships, agency engagements, and system integrations. Eventually, they become part of the digital ecosystem and rarely receive much scrutiny after that. The challenge is that these technologies often collect information about visitor behavior, and California's legal environment has created increased attention around when information is collected, how it is collected, where it's transmitted, and whether visitors have meaningful opportunities to consent or opt out. One of the misconceptions I hear from restaurant leaders is that these issues only matter if they operate locations in California. That's not necessarily how the conversation is unfolding right now. In fact, I've seen firsthand multiple brands that have no Californian footprint still get a lawsuit. Because if a California resident visits your website becomes part of that interaction regardless of where your headquarters sits or your footprint lands. A restaurant brand operating primarily in Texas, Florida, North Carolina, and Illinois may still find itself evaluating exposure related to California privacy laws because websites don't stop at state borders. For many organizations, this topic hasn't received much attention until it's too late. Some brands still don't have consent management platforms in place or integrated. Some don't even have cookie consent banners. Some haven't reviewed their tracking technologies in years, if ever. And others simply assume their agency, tech vendor, or platform provider has it all figured out and that they're maybe indemnified. Maybe some of that's true, but more likely it's not. And that creates a big problem for any restaurant brand operating. The only way to know is to perform a thorough audit of the technologies being used on your site, because that's exactly what the lawyers are going to do. And that starts with understanding every technology operating on the site, what information it collects, why it collects it, where that information is sent, and whether the technology still creates meaningful business value. In many cases, brands discover that they are carrying years of technical debt. Scripts remain active long after campaigns end, or vendors are replaced by others. Vendors continue transmitting the data long after that relationship has ended, and technologies overlap in functionality and create unnecessary complexity. Privacy compliance often begins with visibility. But the second regulation deserves equal attention. Beginning July 1st of 2026, California's Allergen Disclosure for Dining Experiences Act requires chain restaurants covered by federal menu labeling requirements, generally brands with 20 or more locations, to disclose the presence of major food allergens associated with menu items. This includes the Big Nine: milk, eggs, fish, shellfish, tree nuts, peanuts, wheat, soy, and sesame. Brands can provide this information directly through menus or through approved digital mechanisms such as QR codes and online resources. The immediate reaction from many operators is understandable. Gathering ingredient information is difficult. Maintaining it is difficult. Menus evolve, menu items change, LTOs are launched and taken away, suppliers change, recipes change, modifiers that complicate the whole thing. The work required to keep allergen information accurate can be substantial. What I find interesting is where that work ultimately leads. To comply with allergen disclosure requirements, restaurant brands need a reliable source of truth for menu information. They need ingredient data, recipe relationships, modifier logic, of course, dietary attributes, nutritional information, product hierarchies. All that information often exists throughout the organization, but not always in a structured, centralized, and accessible format. Building that foundation requires benefits that extend well beyond compliance. Over the past year, we've spent a lot of time talking about how search behavior is changing. And more recently, I talked about it on a previous episode. Consumers increasingly ask questions instead of searching with keywords. Can I eat here if I have a peanut allergy? Which menus are dairy-free? What restaurants offer sesame-free options? What can my child safely order? Google's search experience is evolving to answer those questions directly via Gemini's underbelly on search, getting rid of the traditional search engine result pages that we all become used to. AI platforms are doing the exact same thing. The quality of those answers depends heavily on the quality of the information available. So restaurant brands that maintain structured ingredient data, allergen data, dietary information, and menu relationships make it significantly easier for search engines and answer engines to understand their offerings. This is where compliance and discoverability begin to overlap. The information required to satisfy regulatory requirements is often the same information that improves visibility within AI search-driven experiences. A guest searching for allergy-friendly options isn't looking for a blog article. They're looking for accurate information. A parent trying to determine whether a menu item contains sesame isn't looking for marketing copy. They're looking for confidence. These distinctions matter, and the brands that can provide that confidence are creating value for guests while simultaneously strengthening their digital presence. Both of these California developments point toward a broader shift taking place across restaurant digital experiences. For years, digital investments focused heavily on transactions, ordering, loyalty, personalization, and marketing performance, and they still should be the focus. And those priorities are incredibly important. But at the same time, the quality, structure, and governance of information are becoming increasingly important strategic assets. Information about guests, information about menu items, information about ingredients, dietary preferences, and about how digital experiences function behind the scenes. The organizations that understand that information, maintain it effectively, and make it accessible will be better positioned for whatever comes next. Whether that's evolving privacy regulations, AI-powered search, voice experiences, or new guest expectations that haven't fully emerged yet. For restaurant leaders, these California regulations are worth paying attention to because they encourage a closer look at information that should already exist throughout the organization and how effectively it's being managed and put out into the world. So that work may begin as compliance, but the long-term value extends much farther. So I do encourage you and the legal teams to take a look at the acts and the laws that have been passed and are about to go into effect. Understand what's necessary to comply But don't let compliance and the threat of litigation be the only motivating factor here. The fact is, having this information out there serves the guests better. And that essentially is why we're in this business. I'd love to hear how you're tackling these challenges. I'd love to hear what you've done to stave off the litigation, but more importantly, how to deliver that information to your guests effectively. As always, please like, subscribe, and tell your friends about this. I'd love to hear comments or read comments here on what you think is happening in California. Do you agree, disagree, and how you're tackling these challenges as a brand leader? Until next time, cheers.